Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have artist and graphic designer Jordan Parvex join us for a conversation about coming out to conservative family members and claiming your queer identity. Together, we talk about how our parental relationships shape our desire for attachment, the othering of queer identities, and the expectation to be the model minority. Y'all, this is a really special episode for me, just getting to connect with someone from my early childhood before I even knew that I was gay, and to have this moment where we take a step back to reflect on the conservative upbringings that really shaped our ability to be our authentic self. I mean, that is no easy journey. And so, Jordan, I really just want to say how courageous and resilient you are to have come from that space and be loud and proud in your own authentic expression of yourself today. That is such a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I hope that you can hear that back when you listen to this episode. And I know that you're going to inspire so many other queer folks who might be going through the same exact thing and struggling to find acceptance for who they are. And you are just such a bright light that there is hope at the end of that journey. And so, y'all, tune in. Awesome. And then let me hide myself.
Same.
I know, otherwise I just stare at myself the whole
Same.
time. I can't even have a conversation.
Oh my god, no. Same. My vision will be like looking right where I am, and I'll look like weirdly off screen the entire time. It's the worst.
And then you try to look at the other person, they're like, yeah, but now they're confused at what I'm looking at, and then I overthink everything, and I'm just like,
yeah, 100%. I'm on these like meetings all day, virtual meetings, and so
really?
I feel like I'm like always staring at myself, and it's so awkward. It's like, okay, like put the vanity away.
It's true. I do wonder, like, psychologically how that affects us. We've never had so much of a mirror to such random situations.
Oh yeah. And it's also like it's looking at a mirror, so your face is flipped, and so like your idea of what you look like gets even more warped. It's so odd.
Yeah, it's super weird when you talk and you start to watch yourself speak. It's too much. I don't know if we need that level of a mirror really in our lives. I'll pass on that if possible.
Yeah, 100%.
How's your day?
It was good.
Yeah.
I gave notice to my job, and I start a new job later this month, so I'm just kind of in the middle of this like weird, hectic clusterfuck of sorts. Yeah,
but new opportunity sounds exciting.
It is going to be much better than my current one, so I'm very excited.
Cool. What's the switch?
It's the same role, graphic designer, here in New York City, but instead of working in-house at a brand, I'll be working at an agency. So just a little bit more distance, I think, from the work and the clients, which will be nice. People are wild.
Tell me about it.
I haven't talked to you in forever. This is crazy.
I know. How have you been? I
mean, God, how old were we?
Question.
Yeah,
I know.
We were like 12 or 13 probably last time we like hung out.
Yeah. Yes, babies.
That's a completely different person.
I don't even know if I had a concept of self at that age. I don't think I really did.
No, I think it's impossible to, right? Because you're like too fresh. You haven't experienced enough to really see how you're going to morph. Yeah,
but the wild thing is when you're in it, you think you have it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just like, now I'm like, do I think I have it now? And I'm going to be wrong again? It's so unstable, and you're like, fuck. When does it stop?
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan of like accepting that most likely in 10 years I'll look back at myself now and be like, he knew absolutely nothing, and that's going to be my perpetual cycle.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably what it is. I don't think it makes the process any easier though.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's like you truly don't know anything because everything's perception. And so then you try and get into it too much with your own self. You're like, so am I only what other people perceive of me, or am I what I perceive of me? And then that's a rabbit hole.
I know. I've really been thinking about that a lot. The more I I like engage in a lot of different hobbies. And so it's
Ooh.
fascinating to find, like different mirrors where like I have a rock climbing group or like people who are more into vintage fashion, and then my school group of psychologists, and then just like other friends. And it's interesting how like when you're hanging out with these different people, you really get all these different mirrors to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, yeah, who am I? I think I'm all of these pieces plus their perception of me, and none of it all at the same time.
100%. I mean, it's kind of, it's brilliant though, because it means that humans are so adaptable and we're able to really coexist in so many different situations, which is pretty phenomenal. Nothing's too solid or locked in, I'd say.
Definitely. And I think that's the importance of relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is like when people are always like, it's so important to be conscious of who's like in your circle. But I think we forget it's because like those people are our mirrors to ourselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, the relationships you allow yourself to have are 100% going to end up being the ways that you see yourself. So if you're allowing yourself, you know, all the love and welcoming and joy, then you see yourself as someone who's willing and who also gives those back, and obviously vice versa to the other situations.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I mean, I've done extensive therapy throughout my life, and the craziest thing is just realizing how formative those years when you are young are, and the way that you like perceive your own value based on how your parents treat you or how your like school friends or your siblings, whomever, and then kind of the ways that bleeds into every relationship kind of for the rest of your life in different ways is crazy.
Yeah, if you're willing to tell me more. I'm so curious what you've learned after years of therapy.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I need to go back in 2022 as well. Every year it seems like there's a new thing that a new moment where you realize, oh, I should probably unpack that a little bit more and really work through that and make sure I'm not. It's like going to the gym in a way. Although I'm not the best example of that either, but
That's funny. No, you're good.
But yeah, okay, so.
And I think the reason why I reached out to you was because of seeing your gay villain trajectory. And maybe that would be a good place to start, of telling me a little bit about what that is in your magazine and how you started doing these things. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. I think, yeah. I mean, last time we hung out, obviously, was middle school or like beginning of high school. So as we've covered, completely different people. And I think gay villain really kind of spawns, and, actually to even take it back a little bit further, Warm Bros, which is the LGBTQ plus zine that I run, that was really spawned honestly out of kind of the Donald Trump election, which is such a cliched thing to say at this point. And obviously it's turned into something else now, but classic me. I identify as gay, and I had just gone through what would be like probably for me a pretty substantial breakup. Looking back now, it was a pretty small, stone. But for me at that point, I think my emotional maturity and also my emotional sensitivity was really high. I was really touchy. And so, the littlest things would kind of rock me a lot more than they do now, which is not to say much. I'm a Scorpio. I'm the most sensitive, human being. My boyfriend frequently reminds me of it. So Trump had just been elected, and I had just gone through this breakup, and I was trying to find a way to constructively use my time. I was working in LA at the time. I had come out probably 3 years or 2 years prior. I came out at the very end of my my undergrad studies at UCSB. And I was still going through quite a lot. I'd come out to my mom a lot later than the rest of my family. My mom is a Jehovah's Witness. And so it's a whole...
We got stuff to talk about. Yeah.
And I am ready. So it was a whole thing. So I was really in just kind of a weird trifecta bad point of dealing with the issues with my mom and coming out, as well as this breakup with this guy. And then on top of that, obviously seeing the political system and kind of realizing, probably like many people at that point, how much action is needed and how much, if we want to be really upset about the way things are going, it generally means that we also need to find ways to use that productively. So, whether that's talking to people or being an ally or an advocate or volunteering or all of the above, it's just things have to happen. So I created Warm Bros as kind of an outlet. It honestly wasn't even my own idea. My coworker Alexis, she had seen me, being a baby about my breakup, and she was like, you need to just channel this energy into something like useful for yourself. You're always talking about how you want to take on like an art project. Why don't you just do something with it? And I, at this time, was a huge fan. I don't know if you've heard of it. Hello, Mister.
Mm-mm.
It's a little piece of, it's a little gay artifact. So probably, I think if there were 10 issues, it was founded by Ryan Fitzgibbon, who's a big, I guess, like queer thinker of sorts. And I was a huge fan of the magazine. And so I kind of wanted to make my own. I was like, oh, like maybe I can do something like that.
Yeah.
But I noticed that a lot of the people in just like queer magazines in general or queer media were all like, you get famous and that's how you are pushed out. Like you don't really hear many stories of just everyday queer people.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was like a good time to see if I could do something around that and allow, people who are and perhaps are not, quote unquote successful or whatever at their craft or whatever art or writing, scenario they're in, and allow them to submit to this zine and then kind of craft it around their stories and their thoughts and their point of views. I mean, I've done issues for that probably on and off for the last 5 years now, 5 or 6 years. And, I kind of fall in and out of love with that, just like I do basically anything. It's always, you go through phases where it's like, this makes a lot of sense for me to work on. And then obviously I think as time has gone on, I'm a white gay man with quite a lot of privilege. So I've kind of approached it in recent years as less of something for me to kind of push on about and more of, if people want me to kind of be the conduit in order to allow like stories, because I've a, small little following that would purchase it, then like I could do that. But obviously I think there's much more important voices to be heard. And so, that's kind of, so let me there. I just did so much talking. Oh my God.
No, that was great. Hi.
Hi.
I take notes, so like don't worry, I'm with you. I'm tracking. Wow. Okay, first, thank you for sharing. Yeah. And I think my initial thoughts are that I resonate with you in so many ways. I think the podcast, I frequently go through that same cycle of loving, hating it, and how that should be totally normalized in general. That at times it feels great, and at times you're like, why the fuck am I doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone care? And then you come back to it, and and talking to people is what I enjoy out of it. So this is great. There's so many places I could pull you. I think I want to pull you back a little bit further. I mean, the first things that you started talking about, going through that breakup, coming out to your mom, all those pieces. I mean, that's a lot of instability, especially with Trump at the same time, to hold all at one time.
Oh, yeah, 100%. At the time, I don't think I quite realized how stressed and kind of in pain I was. Yeah. And I made this joke to some friends and family before where you can kind of tell my like rougher points of life based on my hair color, because I basically from the day I came out up until probably about 2 years ago, I was dyeing my hair, white or, just doing all the things that I could possibly do to it in order to, I think, like push and explore who I was and really try and like figure out my space, both as just a human and as a queer person and as a son and a brother and, all the things that we're always all, trying to figure out. And at that point, I look back now and it is really clear how I think I was at a pretty big turning point. And I think the instability thing you said hits the nail on the head. It was, the person that I had been dating he's super lovely. I still like speak to him. He's an angel. But at the time, it was becoming more and more clear that, I would choose partners who would not fit me, whether ideologically or in terms of just what we both want or what I need as, a loving partner and what I can give. And then, to add to it, I think that plays into those choices around who I chose as a partner also play into obviously the ways that I allowed my mom to interact with me and kind of shape parts of me that, were pretty painful as a young person and then as a kid and, all throughout. So I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and that was definitely a period of my life. I lived there for about 2 years where there was quite a lot of, I guess, like changeover. I was trying a lot. I was experimenting a lot. I was going out a lot. I was working quite hard, kind of avoiding my family. It was like all the things, all together. And yeah, so it was, I had not solved anything at that point, but it was basically the Kickstarter for me to kind of realize that like your problems follow you wherever you go, as opposed to like running away from them. When I graduated from UCSB, I graduated early and I had saved up enough money in order to go backpack. And so I backpacked, I came out to my family and then I went and backpacked for like 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was like, I just need to sort through who I like want to be as a person, without hearing the voices and the kind of assumptions that I think a lot of families, I'm sure, make. And then when I got back, I was like, oh, I'm so enlightened and life is so good. And like, all the same bullshit that we always tell ourselves. And living in LA was kind of the moment that it all started catching up with me. And I kind of realized, oh, those things didn't go away just because I like saw some pretty things. Like clearly that is not what's going to solve these problems.
Yeah. Damn. And this is where therapy comes in, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I know.
That is isn't that always where it comes in? You're like, I have it all figured out. And then like 5 minutes later,
you're like, fuck.
Yep.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm still in therapy all the time. Like all the time. I've never stopped. This is going to be my life.
Oh, see, I go through these phases where I basically, I'll go for like, I don't know how long, honestly, usually it's like 10 months to like 2 years. And then I'll stop for a little while and kind of be like, okay, I think I'm in a good spot. I think I could start kind of just like seeing how I apply these things on my own. And then there usually hits a point where it's like, oh, I need to pop back in there. Actually, I need to do a little tune up. I need to like see what else is going on down below.
Yeah. Is it the same therapist every time too?
No, I am
that's
terrible.
Hard.
I know I wish maybe that should be a goal that I have at some point. I'm actually terrible across the entire medical field in terms of like my
really
consistency. I've seen probably 4 or 5 different therapists for like pretty solid periods of time, but just I've moved a lot. New York is the longest I've lived somewhere. And so like I jumped therapists usually when I moved. I would say probably my best therapist was in Los Angeles though, for sure. I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy and it was,
okay, cool.
It was quite a intensive experience for me.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the therapy that you were doing during this time. Yes, of unlocking all these different things, coming back from your trip, processing all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that your choice of partners was really reflective of your relationship with your mom. Could you say more about that?
Oh, totally. My boyfriend and I have been talking a lot about this lately. I think, parents are hard, family's hard, guardians are hard, kind of the whole shebang. And my mom is such a unique character, but also it's, the tale as old as time, parent is a human being and has their own flaws. And, as a kid, you don't realize that. And then as you get older, that human being becomes more complicated. And the ways that the decisions they've made obviously play into who you become in many ways. And so most of my life up until my most recent relationship that I'm in currently, none of my relationships lasted very long. They were all really quick. I tended to date people who I knew would kind of do exactly what I thought they would do, because it was a great way for me to, I think, avoid any sort of connection or intimacy. I did like the classic thing for me, which is I, would go long periods of not dating at all and instead just, sleeping around and kind of doing whatever I want and fulfilling myself that way, which I thought was really, I think overall was very healthy and helpful for me. But it got to a point where I clearly wanted something else. And then you get to that like weird fork in the road where you're so used to doing something and you've grown to want something else. And it's like, how do you mend those parts of yourself?
Yeah.
And so in terms of my partners, my parents divorced when I was really young. And then my dad went through another divorce when I was a teenager. And my mom, weirdly enough, had a pretty consistent relationship with my stepdad, but the like instability, I think, across all those places, my dad's homes and then my mom's house really led to me kind of expecting to be disappointed by people. So instead of allowing them to surprise me, I would kind of like back them into a corner where they had to do what I had already assumed they would. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was a rough patch of time. And it, I think truthfully, monogamy kind of played a huge role into this, where I had, I've tried many different types of relationships, and I've always been someone to kind of like want to try kind of anything, honestly, and just see what actually naturally fits for me at that time and with that person or those people, etc. And I think something that I realized over time was that I tend to just naturally sway more towards monogamy. And it's like I had, instead of choosing people who also wanted that, I would choose people who didn't want monogamy. And then somehow I would end up like upset about it, which obviously doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, it's really just about consent and what you both want and what you're both willing to give and not give. And so I think as a younger person, I would kind of hide behind that as a way to convince myself that I was like unlovable or unwanted and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it lasted a long time. I mean, it wasn't until probably for like 3.5 years ago that I like truly, and I actually wasn't in therapy at that time. I had finished that round of therapy of cognitive behavioral therapy. I'd moved to New York and I was like, I don't want to date anymore at all. I'm just going to chill and kind of do whatever I want. And I did all the things I wanted to do. And I met all these different people and I kind of started piecing together where I wanted to be as a human being and kind of where my priorities fell. And it just kind of landed me in the space of, I guess where I'm at now, but it was quite a lot of work. And it was, I think the biggest healing thing I ever learned was if I want to have a healthy relationship with myself and with, a partner, I have to stop being so angry at my mom about the things that happened when I was younger. And not for her, not for anyone else, just simply my like anger and like disappointment from that relationship kept bleeding into all my other relationships.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Of course, right. What do you feel like you were angry about in terms of your relationship with her?
I mean, I think a lot. My mom, I believe, she has some pretty intense trauma from her childhood. She was abused and things where she just endured a lot. And it's really, honestly, I think she's phenomenal as a human being because she was, there was always food on the table and she has so many ways where she is so loving, but she would make she knew I was gay at a pretty young age, or at least not straight, based on kind of the comments she would make to my siblings and to my dad. And she would make some pretty damaging comments about, HIV and AIDS to me when I was really young and, kind of pointing out things that I would do that, would be misconstrued in certain ways if I didn't, fix them and that kind of thing. So just, damaging statements, damaging ways of kind of interacting with me as a young boy who, very much so loved his mom and wanted to be accepted by her. And I think it was such a confusing thing to know that someone probably can't love you in the way that you need them to love you while simultaneously wanting nothing more than them to love you. And so it's like that weird push and pull dynamic of begging someone to care for you in the way that you need while also feeling like you're stupid for wanting them in the first place anymore. And so that was quite a lot. And, she converted to being a Jehovah's Witness when I was probably like 14.
Okay.
She was always anti-gay, anti-queer, anti-trans. And then when I was around that age, she started going to the Kingdom Hall, which is, where the Jehovah's Witnesses practice. And I had to go every once in a while. And it was like very clear that, that's not a space for me or for kind of where I wanted to go. And so now I'm rambling.
No. This is all great. I mean, when you were talking about your mom of wanting that relationship with her, but knowing that maybe because of the complex things that she's experienced in her life, that she couldn't provide you what you needed.
Yeah.
I mean, and you talking about coming into relationships with people that didn't want monogamy, not being able to love you in the way that you needed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. And so it's so hard because in that of her experience of trauma, you've also experienced trauma from your mom, and that can create cycles, and that's how we perpetuate these. And so stopping those, I think, is one of the biggest things that we can embark upon. And it shows that you've done so much emotional work that I just want to honor for a moment of all of this work that you're doing to unpack this.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It sounds so much nicer and I think cleaner when you say it like that. So I appreciate it. It's, we both obviously came from religious backgrounds, and I'm sure for you, it's been a journey as well, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't know that I was gay. Did you know that you were gay?
I definitely knew I liked men, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But it wasn't like, it wasn't so apparent to me exactly what I even was until probably high school. And that's when it became,
Okay.
like, mid-high school is when it became really clear, like, what exactly it meant.
Yeah.
When did you kind of come into that being or understand that?
I think because of my own trauma, I have never, my parents are, I don't even know where to start, but equally went through a lot of traumas in their own life.
Yeah.
And I'm also like a first generation student. So like there's just like a lot of like
Mm.
chaos back in my family history. And so I don't think they knew how to help me as much. And so I've always looked on my partners as regulation. Like I couldn't self-regulate on my own. So I've always looked out to partners for that.
Mm.
And I think given within my Christian framework, I was only allowed to look at men as that potential. And because of my codependency, I was in relationships constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, there was times like of exploring in college a little bit, but nothing more. And I would have been like, oh, that's just like for fun. Right, I know. And then I got into a more consistent relationship. And then once that kind of like got stable enough, I was like realizing that I had a lot of desires. And so we talked about potentially opening up the relationship. Never happened. We break up. And then eventually I start living for like the first time in my life, only since like, yeah, I know. Thank you. Since like a year and a half ago, truly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
I have
gosh.
never existed as my own independent self until very recently.
And it must feel amazing.
Oh, yeah. It feels really good. It feels really good. The first time I had sex with a woman, I was like, holy fuck, I've been missing this my whole life. I know. And now I haven't gone back. So, yeah. So my journey is a little bit different, though, in that sense. Like, I am so jealous of the stories of like having the sense of self earlier, you know?
I mean, I think there's something beautiful, though, about you allowing yourself to kind of ebb and flow as you have had self-discovery in it. I feel like the conversation I always struggle with around queerness in general is this idea that it's some static thing. And I think there tends to be kind of a bit of a failure with the like, I was born this way kind of commentary, because it really doesn't allow, I think, as much fluidity that I believe humans truly have. I think the idea that you are some static being and when you're born, that is exactly how you are until you're dead, I mean, clearly, obviously isn't true. And so you're a great example, though, of someone who has allowed that kind of like fluidity throughout your life to then, now it's like, oh, you know what? Like at that point, I didn't know that I didn't want that, or I wanted it at that point because I didn't know what else was out there. And now I understand a bit more about myself. And now I know I want this. And I think that's beautiful personally. And part of me is always a little jealous of the like ability to surprise in that way. Like I feel like that sounds like such a fantastic journey to have these like surprises of realizations and moments where you're like, I just learned something completely new about myself. How liberating is that to know that you're, as you're getting older, you're still learning these like kind of larger revelations about yourself. That's fantastic.
Yes. I love that positive reframe because that's not always where I go. I think the scary part of it is you ask yourself then, was I just subjecting myself to something that wasn't truly authentically me at the time? Were any of those relationships with men authentic? Or was I just so constricted by my faith lens at the time that I didn't even recognize my unhappiness? And I think that's a scarier question than holding the potential. But I think at the heart of it is what you said too, is that at the time, given my worldview, whatever it was what I wanted. And there is fluidity in that. And it's right. And I think your answer is probably the way to look at it, is that truly it's not just like, I get afraid to say that it's not an innate part of us. You know what I mean? But that's the born this way concept.
It's a slippery slope. Exactly.
Yes.
Because if you don't say it, then people are going to really quickly reframe it as, well, then you're making a choice. And then it's like, okay, there has to be ground somewhere within both of these things where it's not somebody just fell in the background, where it's not like, yeah, exactly. It's tricky. And it's why I don't truly know where I stand. I do obviously believe that there is a nature part of it for sure.
Yeah.
But there has to be some sort of nurture in some ways. And I'm not a scientist, so I can't really say much else, but
for sure.
I think there is a fluidity in people, and people are I think that's a fair question where it's, maybe if you had known all the options that were out there, would you have chosen the ones that you had chosen?
Yeah.
It's hard to know, but it's also hard to like reframe your own past
You
based on like
can't.
what you know now,
Yeah.
because that person didn't know what you know. So it's tricky.
Exactly. And growing up, I mean, young boys typically look very feminine, so I think
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of that would also make a lot of sense. So, as I've gotten
Especially
older,
in those days with the swoopy hair, we were all in that Zac Efron phase of hairless, swoopy, kind of like
exactly.
baby looking. Yeah.
Yep. So I think that could also make a lot of sense. But yeah, that's how I conceptualize it now. But I think my mom also played an important role in this for me too, because she would make such shitty comments about gay people all the time, so being so negative, gross, disgusting. I'm sure you have the same slew, and it's so hard, especially at that young age, when someone that is so important to us is saying those things, and how deeply that shapes how you can even see the world. And so, yeah, were you struggling with like feeling, what were you feeling knowing that your mom was saying that, and also equally knowing your identity to some degree at that point?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was a very painful experience.
Yeah.
I had, when I was in high school, I had kind of resigned myself to the idea that I didn't want to ever, at that point, I didn't really understand relationships in general, obviously, but, per our Christian upbringing, I kind of knew that like marriage was the end all be all according to these people. And I had already started telling, my dad and parts of my family, I'm never going to get married. I don't want to be married ever. And it wasn't so much because I didn't want to be married or I didn't want whatever that even means to people, but it was more, I knew that based on what I actually wanted, I didn't want to marry a woman and drag her into like this weird headspace. But it was even worse because I actually ended up at the same time while doing that, dating a woman, high schooler. We were both high schoolers, who was a sweetheart, only showed me like the sweetest things. And I broke up with her when she told me she loved me, because it was kind of the first time that I realized that, oh, I can't be like messing around with this kind of shit,
Right.
And that's such a complicated thing because I was also, a 17-year-old boy who had obviously a lot of like self-hatred around the fact that I was gay. And so it was like this weird, back and forth in my own head, and I'd broken up with her, and I remember that basically kickstarted a pretty like confusing time for me. And the first time I actually went to therapy outside of being like a minor, I, broke up with her, graduated, went to college, and started going to therapy because I was really depressed, and I was just, I did not feel good about myself. And I didn't want to admit to myself that it was because I liked men. And I had done some things that now, if I looked back, I would be a little worried. Not that there's any shame behind the things that I did, but, there were some like hookups that were definitely like the power dynamic was not okay. And it definitely made me feel really awkward being like the young person kind of being taken advantage of by like an older gay man. And I was like 18 and 19. So it wasn't, in the sense that it was illegal, quote unquote, but it was much more just feeling the pressure of being, a young man who's in the closet, who's like obviously has wants and needs. And so I would, go onto an app, or at this point, I think it was websites, because I don't think there were really dating apps, and, feeding into that. And unfortunately, the people on there are pretty predatory. And so it all kind of like fed into this weird swirl of a human being I was from like 18 till 23, 22. So it was a lot of therapy. I studied abroad, and that was kind of where I really realized that I like got back and was the most depressed I've ever been in my life. And I was in like it had gotten to the point where I was suicidal. And that's when I really, I made a choice. I had younger siblings, older siblings, I have a big family. And I was like, listen, I'm either going to like finish it now and just like be done, or I'm going to like choose to figure this out and work through it, because I want like to be there for my siblings and my younger siblings especially. And all of that, I think, and I chose the latter one, thank God. And it worked out. I'm so happy. But it was definitely all those things were because of the messaging that I had been given from not just, my mom or my dad, but also from the kids in school and from the teachers. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but where we went to school, they were doing the like no or yes on Prop 8 when I was probably in 8th or 7th grade. And it was all about giving gay people the ability to get married in California.
I do not remember this.
Oh my gosh. So it was wild because I was in, I think, like a history class. And I'm not going to say the name of the teacher, but one of the teachers played a video. And he was like, we're going to talk about, Prop 8, this thing that's going around right now. And he played this video and I will never forget it. It was a like cartoon, video about how this like straight couple lives next to this gay couple and they're friends with the gay couple and they think they're fine, but they don't believe the gay couple should be allowed to get married because that's about the sanctity of like marriage and like blah, 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 And I remember watching it and just like kind of feeling my entire body drop out. And it was like, at this point I had like masturbated. I knew that I was gay in my desires, but I hadn't obviously come to terms with being gay, like wanting to love people. So it was a very weird feeling.
Yeah.
So it was a rough time.
I just really resonated with the concept of you saying being gay and your desires but not knowing and love, because when I was that age, I was masturbating to women anyways. And it's like, what the fuck did I think was happening?
But you're like separating it though, right? Because
exactly.
it doesn't mean the same thing. Like I would do it like about like one of my like good guy friends, and somehow I would convince myself that didn't mean anything because it was like sinful or whatever. It was crazy.
I know. I'm surprised we're okay. Like, are we okay? Maybe we're not, actually.
I mean, I will say it is my boyfriend came out when he was like probably 12 or 13, I believe. And his parents have always been really, really positive about it. And
amazing.
Like the school, he was out in high school, he had a boyfriend, like all these things. And definitely seeing the difference between the two of us and some of our like communication and our like anxiety, I guess. Like my anxiety in a relationship is so high, partially because I think I always separated being gay from like being in love. I thought of it at first always as like a sexual thing, not as a romantic or any sort of like intimate emotional bond.
Yeah.
And then obviously over time I've grown to like bring those together and be like, it could be sexual, it could be romantic, it could be intimate, it could be whatever I want it to be, truthfully.
Right.
But he never had to like have that hard separation. So for him, it's not as weird to like just be a whole human being, obviously. Whereas I think for me, it's a lot harder to exist as one human being who has a lot of different wants and desires.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'd be nice to be cohesive and have had a good childhood. Woo! But yeah, I mean, I know. We can dream in another life that we'll have that, or that we'll give that to other people that we encounter. Is this wisdom, right?
It has to improve.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, so then in that moment of recognizing, well, I guess it wasn't in that class, right? But like you were talking about the difference between having romantic love or whatever you want to call it, feelings for men versus the sexual desire. When did those start to converge for you and realize the connection between the two?
I mean, I think it was, I think that the like seeds started being planted in probably high school because I was really good friends with this guy and I definitely had, strong romantic feelings for him.
Can we talk about that?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. This is a very, unrequited love in high school, right?
Yeah, but yes, exactly. And you
but like not quite realizing it.
Yes, because you think it's friendship and you're just like, oh shit. And then you look back at all of your friendships like, what is a friend? I don't even know anymore.
I mean, and this is where that's a whole nother tangent I could go off on where it's all around. I did not realize, honestly, until I was probably 25 that you can be friends with another gay person or another queer person and not have to make it also sexual, which I know maybe that sounds weird. I don't know how to phrase it properly, but it's like, I think because there's such a hypersexualization, especially for like, I can't speak for everybody, but for gay men, I think there is just such a hypersexualization. I think men in general tend to like hypersexualize everything and then it becomes this kind of self-feeding circle. But I had never really realized that you didn't have to like sleep with someone to become their friend or like or like date somebody and then become friends. You could just meet people platonically and be friends platonically, and also you can do whatever you want, obviously. But I think that was quite a realization because I always linked being gay with sex, which I think is an issue, obviously, I think a lot of people come across where being gay just in culture and American culture is so linked with the idea of like immediately being sexualized that you completely skip over the parts that are just like sweet and intimate without being physical.
For sure. Every media piece does that too. Like anytime there's a queer couple, it's like, let's put all the sex scenes and none of the just normal relationship shit that happens in a day to day. So I mean, I think yes, a lot of culture and society is perpetuating that. Although I think what you're bringing up is a good point that it might be very different for gay men than it is for women.
Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, totally. And I do think it's so funny because LGBTQ plus is the queer community is such a huge community, and there's so many different things within it, different people, different genders, different identities. Right. And so I feel like there's never like a perfect blanket statement for it, because I think gay men who, are in many ways overly, insanely privileged, oversaturated in terms of the media, tend to get a lot of attention. I think the issues that they come across as a community are different than the issues that other parts of the community also come across. So there's like this big Venn diagram. And I think, at least for me, because I can't speak for everyone, as a gay man, I think there is this weird mix of masculinity and like toxic masculinity that then mixes with like this innate want for love and like to not be shamed. And it creates this odd like structure within the community. And that's where I think we get a lot of probably our like the unhealthy habits. I would say that physical or like the reliance on the physical portions of relationships within the gay community tends to, I think, play into just the fact that for such a long time, those were the only relationships we were allowed to have. Like if you look back at history, like it was very difficult to have a full-bodied relationship with another queer person. It wasn't obviously legal generally. It wasn't accepted, generally. There's just so many things. So it's like, of course it's going to be a challenge now, because now that we have the opportunity, hopefully, to engage in all the different types of relationships we want and desire, how do you bring those all together in a way that feels healthy for each person? I feel like it's a challenge.
Right, certainly. And still, I mean, recognizing that even though we've made so much progress, that still so much of society is adverse to our lifestyle, right? That's just a flat reality, at least in America, when you look at the demographics of voting for Trump. I know, I like to get optimistic, and then people were like, did you see the percentage that voted for him in the election? And I was like, shit.
Oh my, I mean, I was at a wedding. Probably like a few weeks ago, and the couple super sweet, like super lovely, but the people that were there, I don't know, my boyfriend and I were there, and we were singled out by so many people there as like making really awkward, uncomfortable comments about our relationship specifically. And it was such an odd experience, because I do think, obviously, I live in New York City, and I've been called faggot left, right, and center, and that's not I'm used to that. Not that it's acceptable, but I'm used to it. But being at like a friend's wedding with people who you kind of assume are all in the same page, and then you like hear these comments, or like people start like venting to you about how they like treated their gay cousin poorly once, and like how that's affected them. And it's like, why are you like putting the trauma on me just because you see I'm with my boyfriend here?
Right. Just trying to have a good time at a wedding. Yeah,
it was like a clear like reminder of, even if we've made all these strides, we're still other. And I think in some ways that's great, because being other is, I don't think the point or the purpose of being a queer person is to assimilate and become just like straight people. Like we should embrace what makes us different in general. But obviously we all just want to be respected and loved. And so the immediate like singling us out just because it's like, oh, you're two guys instead of a guy and a girl. It's like, okay, I thought we were past this. I thought we were getting over this, which obviously is a huge place of privilege. And so that's also kind of part of that weird soup, is knowing I've lived a wildly privileged life. And so this this sensitivity is also a good reminder for myself.
Right. Definitely. I mean, we've all lived privileged lives to a million different degrees and different capacities. And it's like, that still doesn't change the fact that you're just trying to have a good time at a wedding.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's like, you're just trying to exist and live your life, and someone's over here dumping their trauma on you because they see you as the gay person, not you as the gay person to talk to and vent about all of their mistakes.
Oh, that is exactly it. I've talked to my dad about this. There is an exhaustion of knowing that you are like the token anywhere of anything, obviously. Yeah. And I think I would say, obviously, the largest thing of this is race, where it's very clear,
right,
within the US especially, that there is just a wild amount of tokenism. And that is a like minority burden, basically, where the majority will never fully understand what it feels like to have that burden, but it's up to the majority to improve it. And so it's like this weird dichotomy where it's like, well, how do you get the majority to fix something that they're not really able to see or feel? And so I think I've talked to my dad about this because it's, there's sometimes comments made, I think, towards, I'm sure, everybody, where it's like, well, you can't do that because you're the only type of person they're going to see who is that way. And so you have to be the ideal, the model minority of that in a way. And it's like, that's not fair to me. I'm a human being. No. I'm going to make mistakes. And sometimes it's like, fuck it. I want to do what I'm going to do. And for you to pin me down in a crowd and be like, you're the token gay person here. And so I'm going to, put all of my views of your gayness onto you.
Right.
And you just have to accept it in any space. It's just ridiculous, obviously. So that's what the wedding, I think, was, in terms of, it's like exactly what you said. You are the one gay person here. So I'm going to take all of my feelings about that and now direct them at you.
Right. Instead of seeing you fully.
Mm-hmm.
Why were you talking to your dad about this specifically?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I talked to my dad about a lot of this stuff because I will say he's fantastic. When I first came out, he was a bit rough, and he is he is such a big ally, such a sweetheart, just a big teddy bear. And we were talking about it because sometimes he makes comments. My aunt is a lesbian, and she, there were things that I do think if she had the time of day, she would say to probably my dad's family in terms of the way that they treated her and her partner sometimes. And, she's from a different generation, and she's also just not one to speak up in that way, nor should she have to be. And so sometimes my dad, I think, because I will call people out, if I'm at a family gathering and someone's being, homophobic, I'm going to be like, shut the fuck up, back off. Or I'll defend the way they speak about her, because sometimes they make crappy comments about her being lesbian and be like, well, she lived such a rough life. And it's like, okay, whoa. Let's unpack this real quick. Her living a rough life is not the reason she's a lesbian. Please do not do this. And I think sometimes my dad probably wishes I would be a little bit more tactful and quiet about it.
Nope.
And it's, I think exactly, I'm told him, I'm like, I shouldn't have to change the way I'm feeling about this when I am doing nothing but existing.
Right.
If they don't know other gay people, and so they're putting all, if I act badly one day, that's how all gay people act. It's then you need to diversify your friend group or who you're seeing. It's not my job to be your one person you see.
Yep.
But that's how I got there.
No, I mean, that is super, super valid. And I think it breaks my heart knowing that this is your aunt, which I would imagine means there's some close relational ties depending on, what level those could be. But to have your father and your family so close to an example and still not seem to understand the complexities of it. Sometimes I want to give the people who really have never seen a gay person in their life just a little bit of grace that they've never been that close, but to be so close and to still not get it, you're just like, wow.
Well, and I think, and I'm sure do you have any, is there anyone in your family who came out before you, I guess?
No.
Oh, okay. See, so that's where it's that's where you get the weird dichotomy where it's I'm so happy that my aunt in some ways paved a way for me, but at the same time, it's complicated because then, I guess I'd be more likely to also look at my family and kind of point out how they're messing up still. Cause I'm like, well, you had an example and she's still here, and I don't hear you asking her questions about what her experience has been as a human being.
That's all they have to do. That's literally all they have to do is just talk to someone learn, have a conversation. My sister, so we were, at least I was non-denominational growing up. Yeah, and then my sister converted to Mormonism when I was in college. Yeah.
Okay, we have something in common.
Okay, do you have a sister that's Mormon or the Jehovah Witness piece?
So my dad's whole family is Mormon, and then my mom is Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. So, anyways, I'm obsessed.
Oh my
Keep
God.
going.
Okay. So yeah, I hadn't seen her since she had gone on her mission and been baptized and all this stuff because I was in school and she was on a different side of the world, kind of life situations. And then she came to visit me, and I asked her before she came to visit me, I was like, hey, like, have you ever talked to a gay person before? She said no.
Oh.
I mean, me, obviously, but like other than that, none.
I mean, that in 2021, to me, that blows my mind because I don't fully understand, but also at the same time, I feel like it makes sense. A lot of people, you tend to be friends with people who are very similar to you.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mormonism is a huge example of an instance where there's not really even an ability to be friends with people who are different than you generally. So it doesn't surprise me in that way, but it's just, it's the 21st century. I feel like,
yeah.
Also, we're young. I mean, is your sister, she's younger than you, or is she?
Oh, yeah, she's younger. She's 3 years younger than me.
So it's like, you're also younger. So you're like, how have you not talked to a gay person?
Yeah, dude. Isn't that wild? It's funny though, when she came to Chicago, I did take her to a house full of polyamorous queers and we all had a barbecue. And afterwards she's like, are you going to start growing out your armpit hair? I was just like,
wait, but how was she in that environment? Was she like, okay?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing is my sister's always been shy consistently across the board, regardless of what situation she was in. And like, she didn't get a choice because she was visiting me and I was like, we're going. Yeah. And so she was fine, but she behaved as per usual. And obviously all the queer people are super sweet and like asked her questions and chatted with her. So I think she had a good time. Yeah, I hope, right? Exactly. But it's just fascinating. And on the way back, we started talking about like non-binary identities and she had questions and I was like, yes, like questions, good. Yeah, we're starting something. I know. I mean,
I feel like that is the biggest challenge or the biggest hump to get over is always just getting them to allow themselves to ask questions. It's like, demystify it and it's not that crazy. We're all normal. We're human beings. Nothing is like that crazy, that wild. Yeah. And let me tell you, there is something so special and so unique about the queer community because we all put love for one another and for our community and for each other generally first. And we want to just show kindness to people. And it's like, just let us do it. Like be around us and ask questions. We're not generally going to be really upset if you ask questions, right. But we will be upset if you are an asshole. So it's like, just, hope. That sounds amazing that she had that experience though.
I know she had never heard of intersex people at all. And so that was enough just to like, when we were talking about non-binary genders, I was like, well, what does this mean in your world if this is in existence? And she's like, huh. And I was like, yep, that's all. And I just kind of let her sit in silence and Google on her phone.
Education. It's like, I am the biggest proponent for making sure that our public education is as expansive and informative as possible because most people, you can't leave it to the family to decide things because it's not gonna, there's not a guarantee that this person is going to get the information they need to honestly just like make it and survive. But to add to it, if more people knew about the intersex community, if more people understood that some people are asexual, if people understood the fact that, the idea of a binary gender spectrum is honestly fairly new in human history and also is a huge part of the, colonialism and that kind of thing, then maybe people will understand, oh, there's just gray area in life. Yeah. And maybe that gray area doesn't need to be demonized because I feel like, if you ask a lot of people about gender or about being trans, and a lot of people's response is either, they've never really thought about it, they've never talked to a trans person or to a non-binary person. And then you mention, hey, well, just FYI, like these things have always existed in nature, that it's not some new thing. No one made it up. It's not like the liberal media, let me tell you. And so it's like, so how are you going to mend or coexist in a world where now you understand that has existed before people even learn to hate it? Yeah. And that now you have, with that information, what are you going to do with it? And I feel like I would like to imagine that would change a lot of the issues that we have as a nation. in a world.
Yes, I would completely agree that if we could change the educational framework that has been dominated by the patriarchal society for years of what's being taught in classrooms, we would have a completely different experience of, because I mean, ultimately that education is exactly what shapes our concept of reality. So yeah, it's impossible to pull away the two. And I think that's why it's so dangerous going through a Christian education, which is even like a step further into
the dark ages.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it is, I am such a proponent, or I guess I'm absolutely not a proponent of any sort of like religious school, especially Christianity. It is such anything based or that inherently values tradition over human beings, I think it's just going to be a problem.
Say it again. I mean, right? Like that's all that is literally a great summary sentence of what Christianity is at its worst, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we could even tie it into, I'll tie it on back to like the gay villain thing. The shirt, I made those shirts, I designed them because I felt like there's this like weird idea or messaging that we all grew up with, or at least, you know, Christian kids grew up with, where it's, you know, good versus evil. There's a hero and a villain. There is like no room for an in-between. And also there's no room for like good people to make mistakes and for bad people to have moments of being good. You know, like it's just, everything is so binary. Everything is black and white. And I think the gay villain shirt, it was really fun just playing with the idea of like being a gay villain and this concept of, we don't have many stories, basically, is how I'll phrase it. The queer community doesn't have many stories that have been shared. A lot of our stories, you know, died off with a whole generation of people who died from HIV AIDS because of government negligence and because of a whole swath of the United States ignoring them. And then to add to it, for most years, it was illegal to share stories of, you know, queer love or queer life or just queer existence. And so we have pretty large gaps, I think, in our history because of this. And what you kind of lose with that is like the allowing nuance and allowing like variety of character. And so you always get, it's like, if you're going to show a movie about gay people, they have to be good. They have to be like our idea of a good gay person, because we don't have the variety of movies or the variety of stories yet to quite like allow for like a shitty gay person, you know, like it would go down poorly because not enough people even see these people. And so the idea of like a gay villain to me, I'm like, it's campy, it's fun, but it's also, it's like, I like being gay doesn't remove my ability to be an asshole sometimes, just like being gay doesn't make me not a nice person either. Like it's not related to that at all, you know? And so it's like this playful way in my mind, at least, of being like, yeah, I'm a gay villain. I'm gonna like mess it up. I'm gonna absolutely like lean into the campiness of like you guys thinking being gay is some bad thing over history.
Love it.
And it's like, that's like, I'm gonna take it back and just say, like, make it playful, make it fun.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds like a very playful way to reclaim power that has been lost by the way that queers have been subjected throughout history.
Yeah, I mean, growing up between you and me, and you know, the gay villain shirt is not a serious thing. I mean, the fact that all the funds went to the National Trans Black Coalition, the COVID-19 fund was really great, and the portions from the shirt maker went to Black Lives Matter, and so it like the message funded something really important and really vital, but I think the like message itself was just fun and cheeky. But it does, like, what makes me always think about those things is the growing up in a Christian, you know, home and a Christian church and a Christian school, and always kind of having gay people villainized and instead just being like, cool, like, I think gay villains are awesome. Have you not seen, you know, it's like Miranda Priestley in Devil Wears Prada, basically, in my mind. I'm like, she is a fun woman who is doing whatever she wants. And, you know, she has good sides and bad sides, and it's campy as hell, but it's like really funny and playful. And it's like, that was just my way of taking on the idea of like, whatever we are, like, let's just make it fun. Let's make it light. Let's enjoy it.
Yes. And I love that idea.
Thank you.
Are you proud? How do you feel when you talk about it?
Honestly, and I'm sure when I listen back to this, I'll probably have 1,000 notes for myself because I don't talk about it much. I'm not like a huge self-promoter in the sense of like talking about things. I'd rather it's just like, I feel like it's a little embarrassing, and I'm sure listening to this, I'll probably feel embarrassed about half the
Oh my
things that I
God.
like say.
Jordan.
But it is, I mean, I'm proud of it for sure. I think
Yeah.
I tend to like err on the side of being way too self-serious in general, like throughout my life. And so it's really fun that like something that I just was playing around with and that had a message and a purpose that I wanted, but is not some heavy, like quote unquote, like serious thing.
Right.
You know, it's literally a smiley face with like evil eyes. Like it's just a playful thing. It's supposed to be fun and cheeky. And like, so I enjoy the fact that somehow that came out of me, because that just feels like it feels like it's something that I haven't been able to do very often, because usually I'm like overly serious. And so it was a nice way to like play with that fun side of myself that I feel like I am in person. Like I'm a pretty bubbly human being overall. But when it comes to like writing about things or even like social media, like everything just comes off too overly serious and self-serious. So it's been nice. And seeing people like enjoy it and like take photos of themselves and play with it and like really embrace the idea of like being a gay villain, I think I never thought that would happen. So it's just been really like cute and fun.
Yeah, and to see the way that people are incorporating your ideas, your concept into their own concept of self is very
that's
powerful.
Crazy. Oh my gosh, I did not even think of that.
I mean, yeah, think about what you just said. It is more of a playful reclaiming of the power that has been stripped away from queer identities for history. So yeah, you've created from something that is very personal to you a tangible idea for people to embody, and I love that. And I hope you can feel proud of that.
Yeah, wow. I think, I'm definitely proud of it, and it sounds so cool. As I've said, like, it sounds really cool when you say it, so I appreciate it. I mean, there are so many important voices and important, just like people, honestly, within the queer community. And it's I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I am a really big fan of the fact that it really has brought a lot, just more voices into my like circle and my understanding. Certainly. And, I've gotten to meet a lot more queer artists around the world and hear just about more queer lives than I ever probably would have. But it's definitely just been fun how like, it's clear that people understood it immediately. And to feel understood, I would say, is probably the best feeling. It's like less about them turning it into something for themselves. And I think more of just like, oh, it wasn't like some like weird thing in my head, or like people obviously also feel this way where they enjoy the playfulness around it, which is just nice.
Right. And so much of our experience you can't put into words, right? Like so much of what you've expressed there is, I mean, we're trying now in this conversation, right? But that idea in and of itself is expressed through art. And art often can tap into those things that we can't find the words for. And then to feel that untangible energy that you had to put into an idea and a concept like that resonate with other people, that is the most community thing you could ever find, to not feel alone in this world, knowing that people have that same intangible, I don't even know words, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like their own, it's kind of like, the shirt reminds me a little bit of like Halloween, I guess, where it's like you can kind of put on this costume and it makes you feel like a little bit more invincible as a human being.
Oh, yes.
And I think that shirt is probably, that's why I, like, in the selfish way, made it for me, was because it's like, I feel cool when I'm wearing it and I feel cool about myself, because it's like, no one's gonna like fuck with me on the street when I'm wearing it. You know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna like drive by and call me faggot. Like, I'll flip you off and be like, fuck you back. Like I'm embodying who I like, this character, and who I want to be. So I think for me it was probably more aspirational in that sense. And so it's just nice. And the whole definition on the back of the shirt is about like queer people being their most authentic selves, whatever that means to you.
Hell
so I think that's probably the biggest part for me that I like, is the idea that it really boils down to just like not going with what the system wants, not like, sometimes it'll overlap, sure, and sometimes it won't. And instead of like beating yourself up about it or thinking that you're weird or wrong because the government or the world or culture or religion tells you something, it's like, no, I'm just gonna, like, I like this and I want this, and so I'm going to, and as long as obviously it's consensual and like kind and everything, like, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna be that person. And that's like the one thing everyone in this entire world wants. We all just want to be whatever version of ourselves we want to be. And so to like have the bravery and the courage to do so, I think is something that everybody, can strive for.
Right. Wow, you're giving me the chills.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, your journey is so beautiful.
Oh,
right?
Thank you.
I'm serious. I mean, talking all the way back from figuring out, in that class at Cornerstone, that dropping feeling to how you just expressed yourself now.
Oh, thank you.
Right? I mean, that journey is so beautiful, and I'm just so happy to have you here and to see you beaming and resonating with so many things that you're saying here. It's been so lovely.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so lovely. You are so, it's like hard to explain. You are so intelligent, but also so, like eloquent with your words. And so it's like nice to chat with you. And obviously the circumstances are a little weird because I know I'm being recorded in this instance. And so obviously it's like I'm overthinking everything I say, but, it's obviously impressive. I think, as people who went to the same schools and like, grew up in at least a similar environment, anytime that people are able to like make it out of that and have free thought and be able to like exist as human beings who just love people and love themselves, that's a victory. So congrats to you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you might resonate then in a lot of ways. That's why I created the podcast. I mean, you asked that question earlier of like, how do you change the majority? I think the power is in conversation. And I think frequently if people aren't getting to have these conversations on their own, maybe they can listen to one, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, I mean, I love listening to podcasts. I feel like, and it's a similar reason why I think I had started Warm Bros forever ago, it's the idea that it's like, this is for the people who are talking in many ways, but it is also for people to like safely, I guess, jump in and kind of hear other points of views and be able to like maybe learn something or take something away that helps make people safer, honestly. At the end of the day, like, if you can spread a message that helps people be less afraid of people that are different than who they are, like that's going to make the world a better, safer place and mean that more people can be their authentic selves, which is great.
Yes. Let's both sit in the shared joy that we have made it out of this. Woo! I know. I do think we have such powerful things because of our relationships with the people we have that are religious in that way and that desire to open up and pull people into this space. I think that is part of what our shared trauma is with our family backgrounds and what beautiful gifts it can be. And so absolutely. I think you're pulling that out. And so, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do have one question to ask you that I ask everybody on the show as my closing question. I know. And every time I do these episodes, I talk about a lot of different things. But the one question is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
I think I wish people knew that questioning yourself or kind of feeling like there's so much about yourself that you could be surprised by or that you don't know. I wish people knew that was really normal. There's not really a moment in my experience where you just like wake up one day and you're like, oh, I feel like I responded exactly how I knew I would respond to that. Like, I definitely, especially being in a relationship, I've realized that sometimes like I'll respond to something in a way that I never thought I would respond in that way to it. And it's just like, oh, well, now I'm being surprised by myself and by, the ways that I can still surprise my own like person. So I think just always being like, it's normal to be surprised by yourself and by others. And so like bask in it, live in it.
Right. And I mean, change is inevitable, right? We're never the same person. So like as you were saying that, I was thinking, of course it's going to change every moment to moment because even this conversation has changed us, right? Stepping into this moment afterwards, we're not going to be the same, whatever. So you can change and it's constantly evolving. So yeah, I think normalizing that and not beating ourselves up for being inconsistent at times would allow us to relax a lot more and just breathe and enjoy our lives,
Truly. And I feel like social media especially flattens us so spectacularly.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I think that's something I've struggled with. And I would say that's where it comes from is it's like, listen, like you can learn and evolve as a human being and change. And like that is so completely normal. And not only is it normal, it's what should be happening. So allow yourself to be different than you were 5 minutes ago, than you were 2 hours ago, than you were, 2 years ago. Like allow that to happen.
Right. Because if you hold on to the dead stuff, you'll frequently stay in a less evolved state. I mean, part of becoming more conscious of some of these larger issues that we've discussed is letting go of that old self and recognizing that. Exactly. And when you fall back and go back and this is the epitome of life here. So you tied it up with a nice bow. I know. Thank you so much. Is there somewhere that people can find your shirt or any of your, where do you want to plug?
I was going to say, I mean, honestly, just find me online on Instagram, and that's where I'll plug wherever anything is. Right now, the shirts are on hold. I'm just kind of holding them until I find like a new printer. I want to make sure the printer I use is, it's just like an upstanding company in business. And so it's on hold, but I would say just find me on Instagram, Jordan Parvex. And I'm always kind of pushing and finding out new ways to kind of help people and, chat about and bring things, up in conversation. So hopefully my shirts will come back. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I want one. Yeah.
I know I want to find a way to make it more eco-friendly. And so if it's, recycling old shirts with the screen print on top of it or something,
idea.
A way to recontextualize things is kind of what I'm looking for.
Definitely. Well, yeah, keep me posted.
I definitely will.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, then subscribe for new episodes released every Wednesday, and follow us on Instagram at Modern Anarchy Podcast, where we open up a dialogue about all of these topics. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. And a special thanks to one of my favorite artists, Smith, for the intro and outro song to this show.